Bonus.
Yeah. So yeah, we both we both have our morning beverages, and I feel like we're waking up together, which is super cool because like due to technology, and due to technology and due to the um, I'll just say, let's say, fuckery of this culture, we both have the separation of like lack of community in our immediacy, right? Like if we were maybe in a more interdependent culture, we would be like next, we'd be communing with our
Yeah.
neighbors every morning, perhaps, right? But you're my neighbor down, way down, but now we're on Instagram Live. And so it's kind of like, okay, culture, we're gonna figure it out.
We
Um,
are. I'm glad we're resourceful.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And we just to name out loud in a how we have been doing this is our walk in wonders. And so today we're not going to do the walk and wonder. We're going to do the talk and wonder, I guess.
Yeah.
The talk and wonder. So our walk and wonders are always spontaneous and organic. We don't come in with an agenda. We have no idea what's going to happen, and that is exactly what we're going to do today. So it's like,
Yes.
oof, pressure off our agenda. We don't know. We can be in the unknowing, and in spontaneity, and just play,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
And that reminds me, I don't know if we've talked about it together before, but
Oh,
it's that moment of confusion that sets us free because it sort of
mm,
allows us to not go down the well-worn path and go,
no,
wait a
yeah,
minute, what?
right, yep.
So yeah, I love that. The spontaneity, there's no plan here. I'm going to be
Mm.
as confused as I need to be.
Oh, let's just pause with that, because that word confusion, you're bringing it in with kind of some excitement and curiosity, right?
Yeah.
And but for a lot of us, that word can be like, "Ooh, I'm confused," like, and I'm feeling gonna shut
Mhm.
down a little bit, out of control or whatnot. So I love this play on the word of like, what if we could reclaim that word as a word of evolutionary movement as
Yeah.
opposed to a word of traumatic breaking down,
Yeah.
which so thank you for that. Like, ooh, um, what if, like, yeah, what if, like, this opportunity to be confused?
Yeah, it's great. It's
Oh,
wonderful. And I have experienced dark and light of confusion too. So I know what you
yeah,
mean.
yeah.
And the dark confusion usually comes with a threat, right? So
Well,
I
of
like
real or perceived.
real or perceived, but what I
Yeah.
like about your practices is that you then ask, if you feel a threat, you then ask, is it real or perceived? And how can
Mm,
I
right.
tell?
Oh
Right?
my gosh. Yes. How can we tell? Which brings us right into that important um, and challenging sometimes action of slowing down,
Mhm.
which I just never want to uh, say that that's an easy thing. I was just having a conversation with a friend yesterday, or actually all day yesterday. This was coming up in all my circles, all my groups. Of course it was, right? Because the common denominator of all these groups was me. And so what am I constantly connecting to is this invitation to slow down. My cat's about ready
Jump
to
up.
come in. Um, and one of the participants was like, it is so scary to slow down for me sometimes. And I'm like, it really is. Like, so please don't think I'm like, oh yay, let's just slow down. It's so like easy. It actually does become, much easier over
Easier.
time.
Yeah.
But at first, it will be the most counterintuitive thing in the world to pause and slow down and say, um, is what's happening actually threatening, or am I perceiving a threat? And that's just, it's amazing and life changing when we can do that, and it's not simple in the beginning, and it's not intuitive even in the beginning. Hi
You're
Pearl, do you
right.
want to be here? Yeah.
Hi, Pearl. Nice to see you.
Okay, she's like,
Something you said made me think, oh, what's interesting about being scared to slow down, there's lots of
hmm.
things that go into it for me. I can only speak from my experience, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah.
Um, But one of the things about slowing down is that when we perceive danger, we're moved to action. So the trick for
Yeah.
me is framing slowing down as an action. I'm
Yeah.
still taking care of myself. I'm still acting and I am slowing down. Because if my brain is like, you're not acting,
Oh, I
then
love
there's the
that.
prod to like, go, 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 do
Right.
something.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I love how you name that. Like slowing down is absolutely an action or a series of actions or a doing,
Mhm.
right? And we
Mhm.
were in one of my groups yesterday. We were it's a book group. We're talking about Miriam Kaba's newest book. We do this till we free us, and which Miriam, for those that don't know, Miriam Kaba is an amazing abolitionist. She's just yeah, so much gratitude for the work and all of her team does for the world. In a little segment, she was talking about how we move from desperation in our systems. So she looks
Mhm.
at more system. I look at
Yeah.
more the micro, right? So, but they're the same. The micro and the macro, they're always reflective of each other. And so she's talking about how, as a um, um, punishment system,
Mhm.
i.e., what we might call the justice system, but is often not, is moving from desperation, right? And as individuals in
Mhm.
those systems
Mhm.
and individuals in this culture, we're often moving from desperation. And to disrupt that is a rebellious act, and it does necessitate lots of little micro actions, little
Right.
micro doings to get clarity of, instead of the word threat, do I, what's happening that I am, well, first of all, can I notice that I'm experiencing desperation? Like, wow, that's like, right? Like, oh, I'm experiencing desperation. Okay. So that takes that act, that's an action step, that naming, that slowing down to name that. And then if I am experiencing a sense of desperation, what's happening in my surroundings right now, like just to orient, maybe
Mhm.
reorient to, and I'll just do it now because it's always a gain for me to do this, to really look around my room,
Mhm.
um, in all the directions, even turn, which, as you know, turning engages the psoas in that vagal system, up and down, to look, to go like, okay, is there any threat or danger? Is there something I'm responding to desperately because it's in this room? And
Huh,
that's a
I
big
love
ask to
that.
do, right? To slow down to do that. But we do
Mhm.
that, and we do it slowly so the brain is with us. The brain, the
Mm.
reptilian brain we're including the reptilian brain and the frontal cortex and all of our brain to ponder this question. And when we take it seriously, the question, and we really check it out, some part of our brain and our nervous system is often put at ease, just at least a slight bit,
I
right?
can feel it. Yeah.
Yeah, I can feel it too. And emotional stress or psychological stress may still be there, right?
Of
So this
course.
isn't like a magic pill. But what we're doing is we're slowing down to have a conscious conversation with our brain
And with the
and
environment.
the environment that we're in
Yeah.
this moment, because
Yeah.
our emotional and our psychological plane is referencing another moment. And we're not
Mhm.
denying that, but we're including, like we're always talking about, including this moment,
Yeah.
which is the last thing that we're taught to do, how to actually include this moment.
Right. When often it's the thing we need to ground ourselves in first. Interesting.
Mm,
You there's so much to unpack in there. And the interesting thing that came up for me when you were talking about the punishment system
mm,
is that we seem to have, it's really easiest to fall into pathways of vengeance, which made me
gosh.
wonder, when do we do this to ourselves and how does that play out in the body, right? So if I hurt, um, oftentimes cognitively, the first thing I want to think is, what did I do? All right.
Yeah.
I,
What
I
did I
want,
do wrong?
right. What
Is
did
the
I do?
subtext.
Is the subtext for sure. And then, like, even though I'm not consciously punishing myself, a lot of the things we tend to do to take care of a problem do feel
Mm,
really punishing. And
yeah.
it's like, oh, let me step
Right.
back a minute and see if that's sort of that vengeance pathway taking over as opposed to a
Mm,
nurturing pathway, right? Like, because my
mhm.
why isn't my first question, oh, how can I take care of this?
Right. Right. Like, or what do I need right now?
Right?
What do I need? What am I needing right now? What will support me
Mm-hmm.
in this moment with what's happening, with regardless of how I got here or where I'm
Yeah.
going? But oh, yeah. So how might that look like in your work with clients?
It's interesting. I'm sussing it out because I think the main thing, because my work is nonverbal mainly, but
Right.
at
Right.
some point we have to talk to people. And I think one of the main messages I want to get across to people is that if you're going to look for a story, you will always find a story. If when I ask, what did I do? I've done so many things. I can pick one of them and make that the story about what I did to hurt myself. And it may have some validity,
Mhm.
but is it useful? So in my
Mm.
work, I focus on organizing our movement to match our intention, right? So thinking is also an action. If my intention is to be well, how does that
Mhm.
story take me anywhere? It doesn't, it's a dead end,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
So um, it would be good for me to try practicing and then report back to my students, like, because it is so easy to fall into story, but to
Yeah.
say, when I fall into story, because I
Mm.
will, when I
Right.
fall
Right.
into story, to say, okay, so how does this story help me organize an action that leads me to my intention? And
Oh, yeah. I like that.
if it doesn't, it's time to say, well, that's not
Right.
helpful in organizing this action.
Yeah, right. So to keep that intention, in my world, we might call it desire, but it's very similar. Like, what is it
Yeah.
that I'm wanting? And is
Yeah.
what I'm engaging in actually, how is it supporting
Yeah.
that or not supporting that? Wow, I love that pairing.
Yeah.
Um, you're right. Like, we will take to story, um, um, because we've been trained that that's where the solution lies, right? I'm like, oh gosh, right. And we have to say, like, at some point in our lives, like, that was where the solution, that literally was where the
Mhm.
solution lied. Like, the solution didn't lie in the context we were in, because it was usually a dangerous context.
Right.
So let's acknowledge that. And then when we're in an environment like just the safety of our home and nobody's home, we'll still try to
Yeah.
take it to the story, because it's just the training of the neural pathways, the habit. So yeah,
Mhm.
then to be, again, this all requires like a pausing, right? To be like, oh, okay,
Mhm.
where's my intentionness? Can I come back to that? Um,
Mhm.
mm, and just be curious of what might take me to that, or like, or is there some kind of space of that has opened already? Um,
Right. So in your work, do you ever come have moments with clients where they say, well, and you ask, what's your desire here?
yeah, yeah,
And the answer is, I
yeah.
don't know. What happens
Yeah.
then?
Well, then we slow down, right? We slow down.
Mm.
And so that's part of my position as like midwife, is to be like, yeah, let's see. Let's
Yeah.
see. Let's dream into that. Let's dream into what that is, and then get succinct, over time, like over the course of a session, like just keep getting curious to
Mhm.
name kind of an essential that we're wanting. And the
Mhm.
interesting thing is, and we do this work a lot in the matrix integration exploration, is we refine our attention to connect, or be present and name our desire, that the desire that we have, and then we'll see, like, is that here in any way right now?
Nice.
because we'll take these desires and get conceptual with them.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I want peace. Like, I want peace. Like, oh, what the F, right? Like, that's huge. Like, what does that even mean? If we take it to
Mhm.
concept, we're kind of in trouble
Mhm.
because
Okay.
we'll spin out, right? So we have to
Yeah.
be like, okay, so I want peace. Like, is that here in any way right now? But we can't
Mhm.
answer from here, because if we do, we'll continue to spin. And so we
Mhm.
have to drop down and be like, anywhere, head to toes, is there any sense of peace? And when I was asking myself that right now, for some reason, I don't know why, it doesn't matter, my attention went to my left hand, and I was like, oh, my left hand is at peace, right? So, um, and so it's like, okay, let me just play the game. Let me just play
Mhm.
with that and
Yeah.
see like what it's like to attune my attention and my nervous system and my brain, right? Which is they're coming along for the ride, to attune to that experience of peace, even if it's just in my hand only,
Mhm.
right? It just
Well,
takes one little.
it doesn't have to be just. In other
It
words,
doesn't have to be just right.
right? Because a body part that feels good, and we think of it as a part, but anyway,
Yeah, right.
it,
Yes,
it can,
it's
yeah, it can be something where we resource comfort.
exactly, exactly. It's like gold because it's connected to
Right.
everything, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
So often so a lot of my work is about flipping foreground and background.
Oh, I want to hear more about that.
And in this case, so I'll talk about this case and then I'll talk about my work. But in this case, like for a lot of people, the focus is on the part that hurts.
Oh,
But
yeah.
what if you switch that foreground to be the parts that feel good? Suddenly, what's
Yes.
in the background is what doesn't feel good. Because
Yeah. Okay. I
Feldenkrais
see.
used to say, if you focus on a problem, you have a problem for life. And of course, we
Mm.
have to be aware of the
Yep.
problem. You
Yep.
can't ignore it.
Yeah.
Where your attention goes, though, will organize your action
Yeah.
and and affect your intentions. Even if you say you're going
Yeah.
in with a certain intention, if your focus, if you're putting the pain in the foreground, that is going to sort of sabotage the rest of it. You will have a problem for life. So
Hmm.
it's about, in my work, it's very literally working with the body so that so you can just put the back of your hand against your head and
Hmm.
you can switch. Our hands are more connected in our brains than our foreheads usually. So
Mm.
it will be easier to perceive your forehead with your hand, but
Mm.
you could switch it and feel, and now you're going to use your forehead to feel your hand. And it's kind of trippy.
Yeah.
And
Right.
the more practice you get, the easier it is to switch back and forth. And that's where the freedom lies, in being
Yeah.
able to switch foreground, background, switch perspective, switch
Yes. Switch
what,
perspective.
switch
Switch
focus.
and
Yeah.
and include
Yes.
expanded perceptions, which is what we're really talking
Exactly.
about here, right?
Yeah. How do you do that?
Um, that's constantly what we're doing
That's
in my
constantly what
work,
you do.
right?
Yeah.
But something that you had said, I wanted to slow down with. Yes, is in one. I mean, it's just I love how life reflects life, right? It's always
Yeah.
so. This exact conversation came up yesterday in the same book group of how therapists, even trauma therapists,
Yeah.
will or whoever will say, yeah, like feel that feeling, feel that
Mhm.
clenching stomach, feel that painful heart, um, and they won't know that that is a re-traumatizing ask because
Mhm.
they have not connected to the regulation of the brain and the nervous system first, right?
Mhm.
So we have to slow down, and particularly as practitioners,
Yeah.
it's so important to know that we have got to slow down and include more. And a lot
Oh,
of practitioners, because we don't get somatic training as
right.
practitioners, pretty much anybody,
Yeah.
we don't know how to include. more. We just focus on the problem, right? And this goes across the board in, medical therapy,
Everything.
coaching, like, spirituality, all of
Yeah,
them. They're like focusing on the problem, or, and this is what somebody brought up yesterday, like, how is this different than toxic positivity?
I know.
Right. And it is, and I loved that this person asked this question, because the other
Mhm.
side of this coin is just connect to what's fine, or just be happy, or just be like, there's so many great things going on in your life, right? And there won't be the inclusion of the shadow, there won't be an inclusion of the pain, of the challenge, right? And
Yeah,
so we see this reflected in culture, right? We don't want to slow down to connect to the suffering of, um, most humans, actually, but particularly those who are most marginalized in our culture. We
mhm.
want to just keep focusing on what we want to keep focusing on and bypass the rest. So that's where that term bypassing comes in. So how
Yeah,
this is different than toxic positivity is that we're not bypassing or excluding anything. We are including,
yeah,
right? And we talk about this, the neural pathways for me as a survivor were not oriented to include well-being. Right.
right.
So I didn't have any access to what was going, to what was fine in my nervous system or my body or my somatic system. I didn't have,
Mhm,
those neural pathways were not built. I had
mhm.
to be with a practitioner who took their time to be like, let's orient here. And in the back, and I
Mhm.
think I've even said this in another walk and wonder, in the back of my mind, I was like, fuck that. Like, my urgency, my desperation, like, this is real
Yeah.
stuff, and I
Mhm.
kind of felt like what's happened. Like, I felt a
Yeah.
little unheard, a little, and so how we do this is super, super important to name. I name that with
Mhm.
my folks, is like, we are going to come back to that, but let's get the rest of you online. Let's help the rest of
Mhm.
your system. Like, so I'll explain it and not just jump
Yeah,
into that realm. But yeah, we'll come back to that. We're going to include that. That's really important. And
yeah.
let's just let that nervous system, let the brain be here for us. We want their
That's
help.
so interesting. That's so interesting and has a direct correlate in my work because people
Yeah.
will come in with the urgency. My left knee
Mm,
is
mm,
killing me. And
yeah.
then I'm working on their right knee and they're kind of like,
Mm,
what are you doing? It's my
yes.
left knee. Did you not hear me? And
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
course I
Oh
heard
my
them. So
gosh. Right. Yes.
of
Yes.
course I warn people ahead of time
Yeah.
that what I'm talking about um, is bringing the wisdom, the
Yeah.
knowingness
Yeah.
of what the brain knows about one side of the body. So we're
Mm,
going to make the foreground wellness.
mm,
And because
mm.
it's foreground background, nothing's being bypassed, right?
Right, right. Yep. We're not denying
Nothing's being,
anything. Yeah.
and your awareness can still be everywhere, but the
Mm,
movement is mainly in the well part. And what I ask you to focus on is pay attention to what you feel as I move you, right?
mm,
So the the brunt of your attention is going to be on what you feel as I move, the well side. And this
mm,
begins to inform the other side. And there's no should, there's no must.
mm,
Your body can accept or reject it as it sees fit, but it does. It happens then that when we take the time to integrate later and walk away, somehow
mm,
the left side has begun to try on for size, right?
mm,
Because you don't have to take it on permanently, but to try on for size, what's working on the other
mm.
side. So,
Wow. Yeah.
yeah.
That can feel like a big ask, um,
Mm,
to trust a practitioner, right?
right?
Um, I know I've been in your groups and your in one-to-ones, and you'll say something like, the brain is going to be, I can't remember the words, but some of them that you just said, but basically, like, the brain's going to be doing some work here. And because of the work that I do, which is also all brain, like, everything's, it's all related with the
Yeah.
brain. I'm like, okay, like, I know that intellectually. I'm not going to understand it in this moment. I'm
Mhm.
not going to understand it, but I know that the brain is doing some amazing work that I don't have to understand and probably never will understand. And
Right.
then I know from my work that over time, the brain, like things change, right? Things change when our brains engage differently,
Yes.
right? And
Oh,
that's what,
tell me
yeah.
more about engaging differently specifically.
Yeah. That's so funny because I was like, and I know you know what I'm talking about, but from your world. But yeah, so how the brain's engaging differently. My gosh, right? So in my explorations, we use practices, and with my one-on-one clients, we use practices too. Although it's done really differently because it's a one-on-one. But in the groups, we use practices and really get conscious with different practices, which invite our attention to slow down and ponder and connect to territory that we don't habitually connect with. And then when we do those practices over time, we literally, like, our neural plasticity just rewires, right? So I think it was just yesterday. There's been like a long 24 hours. Just yesterday, we had the final live class for my 2021 exploration. And folks were talking about changes that were unsuspecting. And they almost all had to do with practices and time and being willing to do the practices, even though they didn't. You gotta, you've got to be like, okay, I'm just gonna get on that bike every day and see what happens. And then, like, we've all had that lived experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like, wow, at the end of a certain amount of time, you're like, you know how to ride a bike, right? You just know that you will. Well, this work is more subtle than that, right? And the work that you do is more subtle than that. We don't get to see the riding bike very quickly. We have to wait. At least the neural pathways take 28 days, at least at a minimum. So we need to do like daily different activities to have daily different. We'll call them results or
Changes.
changes. Yeah,
Yeah.
changes that show up. So it's science, and we want what we want, and we're a very instant gratified culture.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that science backs everything up,
Yeah.
because sometimes people need that. They're like, okay, this is science. Like, this will be a little challenging in the beginning. It's not because there's anything wrong with me. No,
Right.
it's just neural pathways, building new neural pathway roads. And those neural pathway roads are bumpy at first, just like when we build a road out in the whatever,
Mm-hmm.
it's bumpy at first, and then it gets worn, and then it gets paved, and then it's super smooth. But that's a process, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting because I've given a lot of thought to how people learn and how people change. Because,
Mm.
prior to
Mm.
this, I was doing health education. And a lot of the health education people need is around nutrition.
Okay.
And,
Yeah.
that's so tricky because when we uh, scientize everything, there it puts us in a different place learning wise. And my observation and my belief is that we learn best when it's a process. You say it's a process, and that process we call culture. Right. So
Mm.
culture is set up in a way and it works really well. Look at all the things we've internalized, a lot of which we don't want. But
Oh gosh.
the trick is to harness this process of culture. And you may not be able to change your culture, but you can create a culture around you. And you can also
An
create
internal
sort of an
culture, right?
internal
Oh.
culture. You create an internal culture. So it's not about learning. It's not about teaching. It's not about succeeding. It's not about failing. It's about creating an internal culture. And culture is process. And you want a process that's going to really move you towards feeling more alive, right? Because
Yeah.
that's in the end, whether it's your matrix integration participants or my neuro movement students, we don't know what the result will be, but they end up just feeling more in life. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Right. And if you feel more in life, that the end doesn't matter, right? It's like it's a win-win, really. But this is a big switch. It's a big switch to be a process-oriented individual in a culture that's
I know.
really hyper vigilant with outcome. And of course, trauma plays a role in that too. So we have to, of course, like, just mercy to all of us humans,
Yeah.
compassion to this re flipping the frame to being able to experience the well-being of a moment.
Yeah. So that
And
brings up an interesting question for me. I'm beginning to wonder, and I'm going to be on the lookout for it. I'm curious to hear what you think. I wonder what divorces us from process. What are the
Oh,
things in life that can bump us out of
right.
process, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think thoughts
Yeah.
thoughts are oriented quite quickly to past and future. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, oh my gosh, right? I mean, this is a thing that I'm in my daily life
Yeah.
connecting to a lot because I'm starting to publicize the 2022 Matrix Integration Exploration, right?
Yeah.
And so, of course, I'm thinking about that. Of course, I'm thinking about this February event
Yeah.
that's months away. And there's nothing wrong with me thinking about it. Like, clearly, right? I have to be in relationship to what's happening.
Yeah.
And if I am future oriented and outcome oriented uh, so much that I am not here, I will be miserable
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because I've left out my reality. Actually, my reality is right here. And so
Yeah.
if I've left my reality to be thinking about a future, then I'm kind of screwed up, honestly. Like that's where suffering
Right.
for me comes in. And I actually don't like to suffer. And I've learned the thought technology of where suffering lives and where it doesn't live.
That's interesting because you're talking about a future event with a specific goal in mind. And so I'm going back to the essentials of neuromovement, and one of them is
Yeah, yeah.
flexible goals. And that's interesting. So having
Yeah.
a fixed goal will definitely divorce me from
Mm,
process. So I know to have flexible goals, but I've never thought of it in this context. Having a fixed goal can divorce me from process. Suddenly I'm so future oriented um, that I'm suffering. Yeah, that's
yeah,
interesting.
I love these essentials of neuromovement. They're so
Yeah.
awesome. So the flexible goals, like I love that invitation. Like it's not going to be either or. I'm not going to leave behind this event in February, right? But I can have fluidity or flexibility in relation to that and keep including what's here in
Yeah.
relation to that, but not leaving here, right? So
Yeah.
this like goes back to our earlier conversation, like
Mhm.
not leaving what's here, not leaving what is okay, not leaving what is not in desperation, or um, not leaving what is in well-beingness, we might say, or not leaving that like, oh yeah, there is okayness in my reality right here. I really want to
Mhm.
include that. I really want the soles of my feet to receive that, the back of my body to receive the stability and solidity and safe. You know, we want to use the word safety. That can work
Yeah.
in different moments here too. Like, oh yeah, I am really safe in this moment. So I want to include that,
Yeah.
not forget that, and be like, okay, and like what do I need to do for that event in February from this place?
Right. And I love
From
how
this
you're
place.
giving yourself context there. It was wonderful to see you look around and in our world we talk about providing context a lot, and there's lots of
Mm,
different ways to do that. And one of the things you're doing there when you turn around is you're providing yourself a context.
yeah.
You're
Yes.
putting yourself
Yes.
in a place, in a time, with a purpose, and it more fully informs your nervous system, right?
Yes. And it's including my whole being. So I'm
It's
not just
including.
doing it from a head,
No.
right? I'm really doing it from like, um, my spine gets to be engaged, my
Yeah.
psoas gets to be engaged, like, and I don't have to track all that. Like, thank goodness,
No.
I don't have to track any of that. But
Yeah.
when I slow down to do it, it comes along for the ride. which
Yes,
is great.
exactly. So how do we transfer this sort of
Mm,
like looking around and
mm,
looking at our environment
yeah.
and resourcing safety through our nervous system?
Mm,
How do we sort of translate this from a purely physical, somatic level to how we do think about future events? And I'm wondering here, I have no
yeah, yeah,
answer.
yeah, yeah.
Like, oh, so how does that go? Hmm.
Well, I think when we slow down and like we can just do this together, and I'm
Mm,
imagining this is happening all the time for you when you're
mm,
with clients in some way or another. Like we slow down to this moment, right? And we just let our whatever parts of our body are making contact with stability that feel easy to include, and we orient to that here for a moment. It can be eyes opened or closed. It's really personal. There's not a
mhm.
right way to do this. Hmm. And we kind of want to give ourselves a chance to do this for a few moments, to keep inviting our attention, to keep orienting to something of ease and simplicity, so our brain and our nervous system and the chemicals therein can regulate. Now, from here, we can connect to our desires, we can connect to our intentions, we can connect to our wants, to our needs, we can connect to, okay, what's here now to do, connect to the action, what action might want to be done in this moment. What came up for me was, oh, I want to contact Z. Z is someone who does a lot of web work for me. I want to contact her because she's helping me to do some promotion stuff. So that's actually what came. Like, oh yeah, I want to include her.
Yeah,
Um, but I haven't, I've not gone into worry. I've not gone into fear. I've not left this moment.
yeah.
Um,
It's it's interesting because what I felt as we did this was meant well a number of things, and I'll say first one and then two. And one is that when I do connect with students, and this is personal, this is not something I've been trained to do, and you'll recognize parallels to lots of different practices out there, but I really do imagine my students as the babies they were, you
hmm,
know, how and what love they may have needed and may have gotten, and just my hope for them and where they are now. And I imagine a future for them in a way that is calling on my enthusiasm for them. So it's just this
hmm,
warmth that then I can
hmm.
call forth, right? For their past,
Ah,
present, and future. And I
yeah,
don't know what their past was. I don't know what their future is. I just know them here. But if I'm connected to them as a person in all time, I work differently
yes,
than if
yes.
I'm just thinking process. So that's part one. Part two,
Hmm,
and is that one of the things we do as practitioners, which I think just applies to life in general, is that we know where we're going, but we only ever worry about the next available step. So that's
hmm,
exactly what I felt you do, right? You sat down, you connected, and you came up with something. And I presume contacting Z is a next logical available step in your promotional work, right?
yeah.
So we don't worry about the step after that and the step after
Right.
that and the
Yep.
step
I don't
after
know.
that.
Yep.
We
Absolutely.
we have an idea of what it might be, but we're only worried about the next available step.
Yep.
And that really helps keep us in process.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in connection.
Yeah. So I want to hear more about your number one because there's a lot
Okay.
to me.
Tell me.
This is where I meet my clients too, but I would use different words, but I want to know from you like when you we slow down and you imagine being in a session and you're doing what you described.
Mhm.
How are you doing that? What is your attention including to allow you to be um,
You know, the
with the
eyes,
depth?
The eyes is what lets me in. So um, people's eyes change a little bit, but in general, we have, and their placement in the face will change and relative to whatever, but the eyes are sort of a constant for most people. And if I really gaze uh, with loving intent at people's
Okay.
eyes, I can imagine those eyes in different contexts,
Okay,
which,
let's slow down for a moment, can we?
yeah,
The loving
absolutely.
intent.
Yeah.
So if we slow down to that, so you are connecting, which GAZY, gaze. This has been a lot on my attention lately, but in a different way. But
Okay.
so you're engaging with loving intention.
Yeah.
What's the subtext of that? What's behind that loving gaze? What are you connecting with so that you
Tell
can
me
be
what
in?
you mean, because I'm not sure I understand the
Yeah.
question.
So you're not just like,
No.
right. There's something else happening. That's what I want to know. I want to
Right.
know, like, what are you resourcing? What are you connecting with? What are you drawing from? I don't. There's different words to use. What are you at? What allows you
Yeah.
to access that?
Well, since my inclination has always been to feel, right? So I'm very
Mm.
cognitive on the one hand, but I'm very much someone who feels
Yeah.
physically. And so, and my expression for that has always been in part movement, but also, so anyone who has generated music, art, movement is drawing on this well of feeling to then create something physical. But
Mm-hmm.
here, I'm not necessarily getting to the physical part, but I'm drawing on this well of
Yes.
feeling
Yes.
to
Yes. You're. Yeah.
connect, right?
Right.
And it's not creepy because connection is just a way to help to allow
Yeah.
another person to
Yeah.
connect with themselves so
Mm-hmm.
that then
Mm-hmm.
they can experience or re-experience
Mm.
themselves in a new
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we could keep unpacking this and unpacking this and
I
unpacking this,
know.
but I think that the commonality that of language that we might have is that we're drawing from wells, and
Yeah,
um, and that word, it's an interesting word because we're
yeah.
connecting to this, like the well of a ground in the ground, right? Drawing from well,
Mhm.
but we're also drawing from well, what's like wellness, as in well-beingness, which, right? I normally don't think about it that way. In
Yeah,
like, because I just in my literature for the next course, I was talking about like this um, available well,
yeah.
but here's the play on words, right? And in doing so, I'm drawing from abundance, we could say, or an unlimited resource.
Yeah.
And this is we're in the territory now of the being,
Mhm.
and it isn't a linear thing necessarily, although there are linear steps of the recipe. That's a future blog post to be written that allow us to access this well. But it's a really important piece, and I think about it in terms of therapists and whatnot, because we
Mhm.
can, without this well we will be exhausted.
Right.
When a practitioner, and you probably know this too, when a practitioner is like, I'm so exhausted at the end of the day, and I'm like, oh, interesting, like, not,
Mhm.
no good or bad here, no judgment, right?
No.
And like, what's possible to tap into so that there isn't the same amount of exhaustion. Again, there's lots of variables, so we're not making the exhaustion good or bad or right or wrong. It
Mhm.
might mean like
Mhm.
we need to do less sessions in a day, like,
Right.
you know my gosh, practitioners can be just ridiculous. I was gonna say, so yes, but then also like, what else is, what might be available that I've not known. Of course,
Mhm.
you're not going to even ask this question if you don't know it's available. So this is where my job comes in, to be like, maybe there's something available here that we can draw from, and to develop and to
Mhm.
discover that together,
Yeah.
so that which is really, of course, life changing and altering. Like, could you
Yeah.
imagine doing your work without access to this well?
Yeah, because I fall into it sometimes. I'm
Mm.
it's not as if I'm constantly drawing from my well of well-being. Sometimes
Mm.
I get sucked into the story that a student
Sure. Thank you
has,
for naming
and
that.
and
Yes.
their
Yes.
fixed
Yes.
vision of a
Okay. Yes.
future. So I get sucked into their fixed vision of a future and that sort of anxiety that people get because
Yes.
it's all subtle, it takes time, and
Yeah.
it's I mean, honestly, my real job, so my job might be in movement, but my real job is to stand steady and to
Right.
really stand
Oh,
firm in the belief and knowledge that it's slow and it takes time. It's
yes.
slow and it takes time. And
Thank
it's
you
when
for
I
naming that.
fall out of that that I get exhausted. I'm
Yes.
exhausted.
Yes. Because we've joined the desperation or urgency, and
Exactly.
that is utterly exhausting to live in.
All
Um,
that adrenaline. Oh my gosh.
right. So I really appreciate your
Yeah.
honesty because clearly I'm not only residing in that territory myself, right? And so in a session, I too will notice that, like, ooh, I've joined them
Mhm.
in their threatened reality. And
Right.
now I will no longer be able to serve them.
Yeah.
So let me take a moment to recalibrate. And that happens very quickly at this point,
Yes.
and unless I'm really drawn in, and then I'll need to name it like,
Yeah.
and my work has slowing down constantly woven into it, so it's very organic.
Mhm.
Like we're constantly slowing down. I'm constantly slowing my attention down to recalibrate, right?
Yeah.
And if as practitioners we don't know how to do that,
Yeah.
we will believe in their reality,
Yeah.
and like that actually just breaks my heart a little bit. Like it kind of
Yeah. I feel
we
that.
we've got to we really want to be able to do some inner work as
Mhm.
practitioners, to draw from another reality than the reality of desperation,
Yeah.
um, to see what else is possible for ourselves as practitioners, not with any agenda that we're going to be there all the time or whatever that the languaging, right? But just that there that does exist, and we can trust slowing down. We have to know as practitioners it's
Yes.
safe to slow down.
Yeah.
And this is again the same thing we started with. It's so
Yeah.
counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But if we don't know that as practitioners, we're not going to be able to do that with our clients.
Mhm.
And then it's not that we're not helping them in any kind of way, but there's a whole realm of territory that we are not going to be able to support them with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's kind of what I'm seeing a lot. Yeah.
Yeah,
Ooh.
that's really interesting. And it'd be interesting to get in a room of
Mm.
practitioners of all sorts and bat this one around,
Yeah.
because there's
Mm.
so much here.
It
And
really
it's
is.
funny because one of the things I'll do for myself is take a big, slow breath to sort of reset when I can feel that I'm getting drawn into my students' reactions.
Yeah.
And it's funny because one student said to me, "Oh yeah, thanks for reminding me to take a breath." My therapist is always doing that with me, and and I said quite honestly, "Oh, you can breathe however you want. I just need it for me
Yeah,
sometimes."
yes, exactly. But it
Yeah,
also does serve as role modeling, right? Like
yeah, yeah,
we are gosh, relational beings. And so, and the same, right? Like I'm
yeah,
constantly connecting to breath in session. Breath is a great integrator, as we know.
yeah.
So of course I'm going to be consciously connecting to it. And if it entrains my client, great.
Yes.
That's like, and it actually will entrain my client, because
Yeah.
that's the power of this work, is that it's nothing magical
Mhm.
or woo woo or dangerous, or
No.
we're not talking about like whatever, insert whatever word. It's just how the nervous system works. The nervous
Yeah.
system regulates through nervous systems, and we
Yeah.
need healthy nervous systems to regulate,
Yeah.
through. Um, that's called co-regulation. So we can
Exactly.
co-regulate in person, but I'm sure we've been co-regulating together today, right? And
Absolutely.
we're not
Yeah.
together, but energy is not separate ever.
Right.
Right? So
Yeah.
we are co-regulating today together, apart and together.
You're right.
Right?
You're right.
Just amazing. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like something's just dropped down into my belly, and into my pelvic floor, and it's like, oh wow, like
Yeah.
the possibility that's
Mhm.
here. I spend a lot of time by myself
Yeah.
with my daughter off at college and
Yeah.
doing mostly Zoom sessions. So like there's something really sweet in my belly right now and into my lower chakras. It's like,
Yeah.
we're here together.
We absolutely are.
Mhm.
And you've inspired me to try something a little different, because sometimes I step back to pause and be in the moment before moving on to the next available step. And it's also regulating for both of us, whether it's you and me here right now or um, a client and myself, for me just to listen. And for me, I would listen with my hands, right? But my listening entrains whoever I'm with to listen more deeply too.
Yeah.
So I can allow myself to be in that pause, just listening, not even organizing an intention to act. Although some you
Yeah.
could argue that listening is an action, but you see where I'm
Yeah.
going with this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is an action, and reorganization will happen by listening in its
Yeah.
own way, its own mysterious way, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is to give ourselves permission to do that, then might give others permission to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Because they don't need us really. Once they learn to listen to themselves, they've got it.
Mm.
Right. Once you have enough of these tools and internalized, in my case, the essentials or how to how to be in the process and explore, guides will always be helpful, but they're no longer as necessary.
Yeah, because we do really have access to it all right now. And I know that that seems false, that it's only false because of all the neuroplasticity that has been built, right? That keeps us from knowing that. So it
So
just
tell me
takes
a
a
little
while
bit
to,
more what you mean about that
yeah.
neuroplasticity has been built.
Well, to be able to listen, right? We have a lot of where we orient attention, for example. There's
Mm,
neuropathway roads that direct us to orientation based on
yes,
our pasts.
got
And
it.
so we won't be able to necessarily be here to listen at
Mhm.
first.
Yeah,
First, we'll have to learn about other places for our attention to attend.
yeah, yeah. Nice.
Mhm.
This has been a great
Yeah.
conversation.
Yes,
Yeah,
I think we're both feeling some completion of our
yeah.
walk and talk. No, our talk and wonder. Sorry, wonder and talk. Whatever. Instead of the walk and wonder, the talking and wonder today. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh
I've
my
enjoyed it
gosh.
so much. Thank you.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, good to see you as always. Good to feel you. Good to connect with you. I'm
Yeah,
really grateful for being able to spend a Monday morning talking
yeah.
about what we love. Mm,
Thank you for the gift of your time and your attention and your wonder.
Bye for now.
Bye for now. Okay, so there you are on Zoom. Hi.
Do you want to turn off
Thank
the recording?
you. Yeah.